Buck Stops here. I'm Barkha Dutt. On the program today, exactly 20 years ago on this very day, the Babri Masjid was demolished in Ayodhya. Many people believe that the Ayodhya movement is now a thing of the past. But is it really? How did that day change Indian politics forever? And can there ever be a resurgence of an Ayodhya-like movement? On the program tonight, that's our special debate.
16 लोग मारे गए थे, लेकिन आज तक कोई हत्या, लूट और आगजनी का कोई मुकदमा जो है इंस्टीट्यूट नहीं हुआ, न इंक्वायरी हो रही है.
Also coming up later on the Buck Stops here, William Dalrymple on his new book and why Afghanistan in 2012 is quite similar to Afghanistan in 1842. That's coming up on the other side of the Buck Stops here. Let's get started with our special focus on the Ayodhya movement tonight. Exactly 20 years ago on this very day, the 6th of December, the Babri Masjid, regarded as a disputed structure by many on the right of the political spectrum in India, was demolished, causing even leaders in the BJP to describe it as a sad event, as an event that should not have taken place. But the questions that still arise 20 years on is how this movement changed Indian politics. Did it change our polity forever? And in what ways? And also, could it ever take place again? Could there ever be a resurgence of such a frenzied and some would argue destructive movement? Before we bring you our debate tonight, for many individuals who've been lost in the haze of history, they're still awaiting for justice. Shikha Trivedi revisits Ayodhya.
These are the remains of a sawmill on the Faizabad Ayodhya road. Muhammad Sabir was the owner. When I met him the day before the Babri Masjid was demolished, he was convinced the secular culture of Awadh and the state would protect his family. The next evening, he was hacked to death while running from the mob that burned down his sawmill. 20 years later, his son Shahid has not been able to restart his father's business because he has no papers to show the authorities it ever existed.
अब लाइसेंस सब जल फूक गया था जो है, इसमें मेरे पास कागज पत्र थे नहीं. जब हम गए वहाँ पे वन विभाग में तो उन्होंने बताया जो है कि लाइसेंस आपका है ही नहीं है, मशीन आपको नहीं चलाने देंगे, बस तब से बंद पड़ी है.
The riot-affected families of Ayodhya received 2 lakhs each as compensation, but no justice.
16 लोग मारे गए थे, लेकिन आज तक कोई हत्या, लूट और आगजनी का कोई मुकदमा जो है इंस्टीट्यूट नहीं हुआ, न इंक्वायरी हो रही है.
After the defeat of the BJP in successive elections in UP, the Ram Janmabhoomi movement lost steam and calm returned to Ayodhya, but the Muslim community says they are paying a very steep price for keeping the peace.
अभी जो स्थिति बनी हुई है ये है कि क्या कहते हैं, आप मस्जिद में अगर आप कुछ करना चाहें तो लोग वहाँ के प्रशासन, पुलिस प्रशासन खुद रोक देती है, साधु संत भी रोक देते हैं कि मुर्दा न दफन कीजिए, ये न दफन कीजिए, वो न दफन कीजिए.
ये क्यों करते हैं? ये
अपने मेजॉरिटी के ऊपर करते हैं कि मैं यहाँ मेरी तादाद ज़्यादा है, मैं मेजॉरिटी में हूँ, ये माइनॉरिटी में है.
If they remain quiet, it's because they continue to hope that perhaps one day the Ram Janmabhoomi Babri Masjid dispute will be resolved peacefully and the meaning of Ayodhya, a place without war, is restored somewhat. In Ayodhya, Shikha Trivedi for NDTV.
So on the Buck Stops here, looking now at the impact of December 6, 1992 on Indian politics and asking a more fundamental question. The circumstances that made the Ayodhya movement possible, could those circumstances recur in India the way our politics has now evolved? Let's introduce our panel tonight. With me in the studio, Swapan Gupta, political analyst and senior journalist. Joining me tonight from Ahmedabad, Christophe Jaffalo, political scientist and author, a keen observer of Hindu nationalism and politics and caste and religious identity in India. Also joining me tonight, Yogendra Yadav, one of our best-known political analysts, now also a politician, a member of Arvind Kejriwal's Aam Aadmi Party. And also with me in the studio, Mazhar Hussain from Hyderabad, also the director of Confederation of Voluntary Associations, or COVA. Swapan, I'd like to start with you. In one of your columns on Ayodhya, you argued that this was a almost revolution. You know, it stopped just short. What would it have taken for it to be a complete revolution?
Oh, well, I think for a complete revolution, you would have needed an entire en bloc Hindu consolidation, not merely of society, but also of the political parties. Remember, after December 6th, it was the BJP and the RSS which were sort of seen to be at the front, organizing the movement.
The political patrons,
the political patrons of the movement, they actually applied the brakes. So it was very important. So it was almost, they felt that this was a movement which was really getting out of hand, that this was creating fissures far more than could have been controlled by anybody.
Did they lose control? That's the
Of course
key question.
they lost control.
They lost control?
Of course, it was quite evident. Anybody who was there in Ayodhya on December 6th could have vouched for the fact that this was a movement which had slipped out of the control of those who had promoted it. That it was the crowd, the mob, the Karsevaks, call it whatever you want to, who took matters into their own hands and decided that they're going to take the movement to another level altogether. And it was completely an unanticipated thing.
One of the other arguments that you've made, before I take this to Yogendra, is that it was less a frenzied or a galvanizing of emotion around the Ram Mandir, though it was in the Ram Mandir's name, but more a reaction to surrounding political circumstances. Khalistan you talk about the insurgency in Jammu and Kashmir, you talk about what was perceived by many to be the politics of appeasement by Rajiv Gandhi, the Shah Bano judgment. So you mean the Mandir was incidental?
Yes, I think Mandir became the symbol of it. But actually, there had been a simmering, what we might call a simmering majoritarian discontent, which is that after a long time, the Hindus felt, a large section of Hindus felt that they were being taken for granted. And they wanted to apply correctives to the system. And remember, this was also coincided with the profound crisis of the Indian economy. Socialism was running out of steam, the Berlin Wall had collapsed, Soviet Union had disintegrated. So all the cherished assumptions on which the old Nehruvian order had been based was slowly breaking apart. So I think Ayodhya movement, the Ram Temple movement, gave it that final push over the cliff.
India's #1 news app just got even better. Download NDTV's new app. Fully optimized for retina display. Full screen view. Faster response time. And Sudoku. NDTV's new iPad app. Download now.